Hi, and welcome to this hopefully fairly quick-ish session on getting started in industrial or ICS OT cybersecurity. This version is designed for those of you that have an IT cybersecurity background rather than those coming from a OT engineering automation background, and that's going to be a different book and different session. Even though a lot of the content is very similar, there's 80-90% overlap. There's definitely some substantial differences depending on which part of the world you're coming from the from a technology perspective. But before we get started, just to mention, if you haven't got a copy of the book yet, you can find it on my GitHub repository. So if you go to github.com/utilsec, then in the lower right-hand corner, you can see Getting Started with ICS. So the only version there is the IT cybersecurity version, and then the OT one's going to be out within the week. So if you're looking for the other one, come back in a couple of days, and it should have that for you. So I just wanted to point that out. So I'm going to try and get through this and hit the highlights, but not read the entire book to everybody to help kind of speed things along. But I did want to put this together as basically a list of resources and give people an idea of how to get into ICS OT cybersecurity, because it is the most common question I get today by far, and wanted to again give folks different resources to be able to help them in that journey. Just like I wish I had this when I got started, and I'm already working on an updated version because I'm already thinking of, oh, I forgot to put this in or I forgot to put that in. But so my plan's to keep this updated on a quarterly basis. So that's what you'll see along the way. There's a little timestamp. But anyways, so did want to include a huge thank you to, Michael Hasante was really kind of the founder of ICS cybersecurity, and especially from a Western Hemisphere perspective, but even globally, to Rob Lee, who is the CEO and founder of Dragos, but also teaches through SAN still, and taught by far the most valuable class I've ever had in my career. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on, and of course, acknowledging everybody that works in our incredible facilities. So we mentioned the owners of those facilities, but I think more importantly, right, the people that run the facilities and design and engineer the facilities and secure them. I mean, it's a huge job, and you think of all of the facilities, globally that the world depends on, and where we would be without those. And so it's very, very humbling when you start to think about those environments and all the people that work to make those happen and keep them secure. So that's really, a big part of why I do this. And also, of course, I think number one at this point is helping people get into ICS OT cybersecurity, because we need more people in cybersecurity in industrial environments. And so that's really why I started pushing down this path and wrote this ebook, and I'm writing a much longer involved book as well. So, but just wanted to get started. So that's a little bit about me. I'm a traditional IT security person for just about 30 years, but started getting into industrial control security in 2010 when news of the Stuxnet incident had come out, and then just shortly after that, I started working at one of the world's largest engineering companies, and so it was a perfect fit. And now I lead the global ICS OT cybersecurity practice there, or we just call it industrial controls, control systems, but not a lot of people know necessarily what control systems means, so I just say ICS OT. So again, the idea is really putting this book together to help people get started with getting into cybersecurity for industrial controls. Again, this was the book I wish I had. Again, ideally it's little less than 50 pages, and you can see it's not a traditional book, so it's a lot shorter and a lot quicker to read, really. Again, it's a collection of resources and an idea of how to create your path, because again, this is kind of how I stumbled down that route, but there were no resources, even only, I mean, it's scary. It's only 13 years ago when I started getting into industrial controls. There weren't a lot of people that were very welcoming at the time. And you can still find some folks that aren't very welcoming, but thankfully there are a lot more, vastly more, that will welcome you. Into the community. They'll welcome you in their environments, right? Their plants and their sites to be able to help you understand better. So it's amazing. There's a lot of amazing people out there, thankfully, to help us get in. So a couple of things just to think about. Take your time to learn. As you get into industrial control security, it's definitely a very specialized niche of overall cybersecurity. And if you're coming from an IT cybersecurity background, you have a lot of the basic knowledge that you need to secure these specialized types of environments. But there's really two things to keep in mind. Is one, OT environments are very different than IT. And there's also the idea of safety considerations, most importantly, right? So we don't ever want to do anything that puts somebody's life in danger or potentially could just cause harm. That's always something that we're watching out for. And then it takes time to learn, because basically you need to learn how to not only, and we talk about think like an engineer, but also how different environments are engineered and designed. And the more you understand, the better. You don't have to understand every piece of the puzzle, but the more you understand, the more it makes you better suited to protect that environment. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. You can see number two, just like any time you get into a new field or area, right, there's, especially in ICS, there's a lot of acronyms, and there's a lot of acronyms that you don't know at first. I think like in IT, right, we didn't know what TCP or UDP were at first, right? And there's a lot of work into going in and understanding those, and then they opened up this huge world for us, and so that's very similar to what you see in ICS OT. So we'll talk about HMIs and PLCs and R2Us and SCADA, SCADA, what all those stand for. But and then do mention, and I already started to touch on this, the cybersecurity community as a whole is incredible. Especially a lot of people look to Rob Lee, who's built so much of the community himself. Being open and embracing people that want to come in and learn, rather than, I call it, the old guard, where they're very, they just keep everybody at arm's length and they don't want new people coming in. And that's just not how we're going to be able to protect our environments these days. So we do need to be able to work together. And again, we'll talk more about that as well. So the idea is that, it's important that we look at securing ICS environments, because really do believe it's about protecting the world around us, whether it's a power plant or a manufacturing facility that creates insulin, for people with diabetes, or we look at maybe transportation, right? Maybe rail, commuter rail, getting people to and from work safely, right? It's that's just the tip of the iceberg. Right, so we can live without power for a couple hours, but it's when a couple hours becomes a couple days, or a couple days becomes a couple weeks or months. That's where we get into Walking Dead territory and the end of civilization as we know it. And so that's why I've definitely pivoted to industrial control security and looking at how important it is to ensuring our lives and those of our families and friends, and it doesn't take away from general IT cybersecurity in any stretch of the imagination, because I always felt very strongly that also helps protect our families, our friends, our coworkers, our companies, and that's still very, very, very true. but I think it's even more so when we get into this specialized niche of ICS OT cybersecurity. So one thing to point out is the number of attackers and the types of attackers and the number of attacks targeting OT environments is only increasing every day. And I still bring over from IT where we talk about, right, it's not a question of if, but a question of when the attackers are going to get in the network. And I think that's also very true in the industrial control world, that and a lot of owners and operators, the people that own and run these industrial control facilities, they don't see themselves as targets, and they're not prepared for when they have an incident. Again, it might not be today, might not be next week, but maybe next year or the year after that, or you get the idea. And so incidents happen, but again, the number of attacks is going up. The different types of attackers is only increasing, which we'll talk about in a few as well. You can see I would say there's probably been, at least for me, a dozen or so important ICS events that have occurred over time. I just included a few in here. So I think the one that was probably the most fascinating for me earlier on to mention is the Davis-Besse power plant that was hit by SQL Slammer, because this is a power plant. You can say it was a nuclear power plant. So nuclear power plants should be what we call air-gapped, right? There's no network connection outside of the plant. And yet they had systems that were infected by SQL Slammer. Well, SQL Slammer, right, was an internet worm, right? Virus running around the internet, infecting any machine that had Microsoft SQL Server running on it that was not patched. And so it's like, well, how did this get into a power plant to infect systems to where they had to shut them down for about 8 hours? It didn't impact the environment. There was no impact to safety. The plant wasn't going to explode. Everything turned out okay, but it still would be considered a very close call. And the idea was a vendor had run a T1 line from the power plant into their office, and their office had become infected with SQL Slammer, and then SQL Slammer spread through that T1 line into the power plant, into the nuclear power plant, and so that was back in 2003. But again, it wasn't an attack designed specifically for an industrial control environment. It's what we call commodity malware. It's just designed for any regular old Windows system or application running on top of Windows, like SQL Server. So that was, again, it's another one of those that I find fascinating from the early days, if you want. Here we talk about, again, I mentioned Stuxnet, which was when the Americans and the Israelis worked together to target Iran and had created this technological marvel. That's really what had suckered me in initially, was just the amazing work that they put in to the malware, to not only to get into the environment, but not only to gain control over the systems that physically control the centrifuges that spin the uranium, right, to enrich it to be able to make a nuclear bomb, but also that they hid that fact from the operators. So the operators in the control room would look at their dashboard and everything looked good. And at the same time, behind the scenes, the centrifuges were spinning up and spinning down and spinning up and spinning down to where they were becoming physically destroyed. And so the operators had no clue, because Stuxnet was making it look like everything was fine, even though it wasn't. And so it was really a thing of beauty. And that's really what started to get me into that world. It wasn't necessarily that they were targeting something physical. It was just the technological marvel that Stuxnet was. And then then I started to realize, they're reaching out and touching these things in the world and controlling things out in the world. And that really makes you then start to think a little bit more. So in 2015, 2016, potentially even in 2017, but not very well advertised, was the Russians came in and created blackouts in the Ukraine. But talked about, it's kind of their test bed for, the Russians always, kicking the Ukrainians down, while they're down. And obviously a lot has transpired since then as well. But And they would come in and turn the power off, and it would last 6-7 hours until the power company Ucronegro fell back to manual operation. So that's the nice thing in a lot of types of these incidents. It's the computers that are used to control these environments are taken out, but at the same time we can go ahead and fall back to manual operation. So you get people out in the fields flipping breakers and running systems. It's not ideal, right? Because we're putting people in harm's way, but at the same time, we'll get the power back on and work to keep them as safe as possible. So Trisis or Trident was also probably the most significant incident in a lot of respects, where we saw the Russians, again, that targeted a petrochemical facility in the Middle East. And what they had done was they were able to compromise the SIS, the safety instrumented system. And what that is it's the fail-safe backup for a industrial environment. So in this case, if that petrochemical refinery had an issue, some type of fault condition that could potentially lead to maybe like an explosion, or maybe something just would become physically damaged and the plant would crash down, that the SIS kicks in when it has that fault condition and safely shuts everything down, so it prevents anybody from being hurt, it prevents the facility from being hurt. So Rob always Rob Lee talking about always expresses this idea that the only reason an attacker would take control over the SIS is to kill somebody. And I would think that makes exact sense. I mean, maybe you can say, oh, they're just looking at it to destroy the facility. But if you're going to destroy the facility, you're also going to hurt or kill people. No doubt about it. So there's definitely a lot of concern there, and it starts to get an idea of, again, some of the ramifications, the implications in cyber in these types of environments. So, and then in 2021, so March or May, we had Colonial Pipeline, and this is where it wasn't a advanced nation state attacker like with Stuxnet or the Ukrainian blackouts or Trisis. It was a ransomware group, right? That had they were just sending out emails to everyone in the world, trying to get people to click to infect their system so that they could get money for people paying the ransom to get access to their data back. And somebody at Colonial Pipeline had fallen for a phishing attack and had infected their system, and it infected all of the IT systems in the back office at Colonial Pipeline. And so this resulted in one way or the other, right? The OT network responsible for running the pipeline was shut down, and it was down for 10 days. And that pipeline was the largest gasoline pipeline in the United States. And so it resulted in people, not I would say not having gas, but you would go to one gas station and they didn't have gas, so you had to go around the corner to another gas station and wait an hour in line to be able to get gas. So there was real world implications, and that was really the first time start to see a lot of people start to take ICS security more seriously. We thought Trisis would be kind of that call to action, and it just wasn't, unfortunately, for a few people in the industry. I definitely especially took note and really pushed on that and saw a few more people come into cyber and industrial controls, but Colonial Pipeline, I think it's kind of like the target breach in IT. A lot of businesses, those owners out there, started to realize they needed to take cybersecurity more seriously in these environments. So just to kind of highlight, just to set the stage on why we're here, right? So the rest of the ebook goes through these 10 steps that you can get, to kind of get started to help you down your path into control system cybersecurity. So I don't have to read those to you, but the first thing I talk about, and this was very important for me, again, coming from 20 years in IT cybersecurity, probably 20 plus, the idea was, I needed to think like an engineer, and there's a couple of reasons for that. I don't even think I probably put all of them in here, but I think one of them is you need to be able to understand how the different facilities are designed, the physics of the plant. And I love physics. I hated other sciences like chemistry, but I loved physics. So it's also a lot of fun for me from that perspective, especially when going into new environments. But not only do you have to understand how environments work and be able to ask the right questions, but by doing that, it also helps you connect, I think, at a much more personal level with the engineers, the people that work in automation, the technicians, the folks that run the facilities, that it helps you connect with them, and where they're much more, I guess, really willing to work with you rather than not. Oh, I saw a typo in there. So the idea is sometimes you can meet a lot of resistance going into a control system environment because they just see you as an IT person and that you don't know or don't understand engineering and control system principles. So if you can connect with them and demonstrate to them that you do, or at least say, hey, I don't know everything about this environment right now, but I want to learn. I need your help to do that. That goes a long way in really establishing that trust and almost like a bond where they're then, willing to work with you and help you. And that's where we get to the point where when we're working together, we are securing our environments. And that's ultimately where we need to be. So that's the idea really behind number one. Right? And so you can see there's some resources, and these are just a few examples. So, whether you're going into different areas. So look for information about whatever type of environment. If you're going, right, I don't have like say gold mining on the list. So if you're going to work in a gold mine from a control systems perspective, do your research on gold mining. Right, but that's the idea, and you can see the note on the left-hand side talking about every environment is different. Not only is a power plant different from a manufacturing facility, which is different from a gold mine, but mines themselves have different types of there's open pit, there's underground, and there's different types of power plants and so on. And then even if you had, let's say, two natural gas power plants. They can be very different between them as well. So just keep that in mind, that every environment's different. So they have unique, different needs. So you have to be able to be flexible and, again, learn the differences, work with the engineering teams, work with the folks that run the facilities and maintain them, because that's the only way we're going to really understand what we need to know to be able to protect these environments. So. And then there's some more resources. Again, there's a kind of a blog post, and then there's a lot of free courses, engineering courses at MIT. So the more time you can put into it, the more you can learn like an engineer. Again, so much the better it helps build that bond, right? It allows you to have much better, more meaningful conversations with folks on the control system side and get better protect our environments. So number two, this is where we touched a little bit on earlier. There's a lot of acronyms in control systems. Again, just like any field, but there's something, at least for myself, and I tend to get a sense for a lot of people coming from IT cybersecurity that when you look at, for some reason it's like, because it's almost like this whole new world. It's not just a computer or the internet, which is everywhere. We're talking about, getting into a power plant, or, like I said, a manufacturing facility or a chemical refinery. And so when we see things like PLC, or ICS, OT, DCS, RTU, right, IAX, right, which is, and so on and so forth. It's what are all these things, and they can almost, at least for me, they almost seem like magical or mythical, right? And even as I started to learn, it was still very magical in a way, if that makes sense. So it's still very, and in some ways it can be still. Sometimes I still can't believe I work in these types of environments. So it's one of those that we need to start to learn, though, right? What each of these stands for, what they mean, because the names typically do give away pretty much what they do. But of course, then we're still doing research to understand really what each one means. Right. So just like I was mentioning, it's right in the beginning, you go into any field, right? There's lots of acronyms and there's lots of knowledge that you have zero of and you need to pick up. Just remember, coming from an IT cybersecurity background, you have a huge foundation to come into the environments, but keep an open mind, right? Especially if you don't know anything about that environment or how it's engineered or designed or how it runs, that you need to gain that information and then combine it with your cybersecurity knowledge and understanding how we do cybersecurity in OT. That's how we secure these environments, right? So you can see just a couple of resources to help get you started, kind of a quick start along this path. Is really, there's some great books. Sandworm by Andy Greenberg is my favorite, but you can see some others. Hack and Expose is also one of my favorite books as well, because I almost come from a penetration testing background and have a lot of fun with that. But you can see there's a lot of great resources there. There's a lot of great podcasts that are out there as well. These are the ones that pop up on my radar on a continual basis. There's a lot of other great ones out there, but I don't come across them as frequently. So these are the big ones. So okay, we'll just put those there for reference, but definitely check those out, especially if there's a subject. And most of these are every week or every other week, and check them out. They have a lot of incredible guests, a lot of different knowledge. I even got into, I think it was the Industrial Security podcast that had a gentleman that was just talking about control systems in mining, right? And I had just started doing some mining projects, which was really fascinating because I'm a big Gold Rush fan. So I really enjoyed listening to him and his talk. And that's not something that I had encountered, previously anywhere. So it was really cool to listen to. So anyways, there's a lot of, it kind of builds into this idea. There's a lot of training options out there. There aren't a lot of free training options though. So the best training resources you can get for free though are through CISA. So CISA is the you can say Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or you can say the U.S. government agency for helping not computer security, but also they have a component that focuses on industrial control security, or I guess security for the critical sectors. But anyways, so the idea is they do a series of courses and make that available online for free since COVID. So you can go, there's other advanced classes you can go to Idaho National Labs to take. So there's definitely costs associated there, but a lot of their courses are now available for free. So definitely take advantage of those. Great, incredible material. Again, it's free, and they're not limited to U.S. citizens only. So anybody can take it anywhere in the world. So take those out. And then I've started putting content out on my YouTube channel, which is why I'm recording this. so I'll have that there as well. So there's you can see not quite so free courses, but Dragos has their academy, which is great because probably the best training out there comes from SANS, but SANS is also $10,000 a course. If you can take the course with Rob Lee, it's the best course I've ever taken. I would pay $10,000 again if I had it, even just to be able to sit there. I mean, for an entire week with Rob Lee in the same room, and be able to ask him questions. I mean, he is the global thought leader in industrial controls. At least from a Western Hemisphere perspective. And I think he also has a lot of respect from, the United States adversaries on the other side of the table as well. So it's just, if you have $10,000 to spend, it's well worth the investment. But so you can still get very similar content, but at a much lower price through Dragos. ISA has a series as well for certification, and then SANS, and we're going to talk about both of these at the very end in the certification section, so I'm not going to jump into those. And there's some Udemy courses out there. I've heard good or at least decent things about. I have no experience with any of those though, but I know that's commonplace that people go to look at. So definitely check those out. So again, we'll come back and talk about the two big ones, the 62443 series from ISA, IEC, and then the SANS. So, number 4. Now, there's two main standards to explain how to do cybersecurity in control system environments, or how do we build a cybersecurity management program for ICS OT. And so there's ISA 62443, which is really the gold standard that most people look to. They see it as a kind of a practical approach to implementing security in our control system environments. And there's also NIST 882. So ISA, IEC, so ISA is more like the United States version of their European counterparts, which is IEC. So depending on which part of the world you are, you might see ISA or IEC, but it's the same thing essentially. And it's the same framework or same standard. And so it's globally recognized, where NIST is solely, based off NIST is a group that has come out of and is sponsored by the United States government. So it doesn't take away from the standard. At the same time, it's not going to be as internationally accepted as something like ISA or 62443. So, but if anything, I say keep an eye on both, right? Leverage both. And there's a lot of overlap undoubtedly between the two, but there's probably some small differences that would help, that, protect your environments, right? We want to get everything. So you can see number 5, gain hands-on experience, right? That's always a big one for people, especially trying to get into a new field. The great thing is if you have an IT cybersecurity background, you have that hands-on knowledge. Now it's really about getting hands-on experience just dedicated to control systems. So the best way to do that, if you don't have a control system environment to work in, if you can't just go into a power plant, that to build a home lab, if you're doing that, keep it isolated, from other networks, just like any lab. Start small, because they get very expensive very fast. Because really, and that third point talks about, you really want to buy the assets themselves, so the control system. So when you talk about like a PLC, a programmable logic controller, you want to be able to buy one of those. But if you buy even a kind of the, how to put it, like a cheap version of a common PLC, if you buy it off of eBay or some type of secondary market website, that it could still cost about $500 US. And I just bought a Schneider Modicon PLC not long ago, and so and that's used, right? So that's not cheap. Now there are new ones. There's a series of PLCs called Click PLCs from Automation Direct. These are the ones actually SANS uses, and you can buy a brand new fully loaded one for like $400 or $500, which they're amazing, and they're even easier to wire. So definitely suggest those, but and I actually have one of those as well. But I didn't buy both at the same time, right? And then you still have to add things like switches and maybe a laptop with running VMware, and it's not cheap. So take your time, save your money, right? Budget appropriately. Use virtualization where you can. I always talk about using the right tool for the right job. What this means is sometimes tools in IT also can be used in OT, like Wireshark, right? When I go into most OT environments, most engineers and operators and technicians, they know Wireshark. They've used Wireshark. They've used Wireshark to capture network traffic in the OT environment for troubleshooting. So that's one of those things that you can always bond over, I find, because yes, they know Wireshark. So when you mention it, they're like, oh yeah, I've used that tool. So it's great. And then there's a lot of simulation software out there as well, so that you can use those. So, but a couple of things to consider. So one day I'll do a much more involved guide on how to build out a home lab, but that's just at a high level. So we did mention talking about learning to program PLCs. I think this is one of those that's very fundamental. At least it was for me, because as I got into control system environments and securing them, until I got my hands on that first PLC, and then I actually started to write that first piece of code in ladder logic, which is the most common programming language for PLCs. Yeah, it was just another one of those things that really helped things click into place for me. So it's one I can't stress enough. Again, whether you use software simulation to do it for free, or buy like a Click PLC there, you can see from Automation Direct and get those going. So here's some resources to help you get started on PLC programming as well. And if you want, I did find this link at the very bottom. You can see how to turn like a Arduino super small cheap asset running OpenPLC, which is a software-based PLC, to emulate a real one. So it could help reduce the cost. There's just a lot of time and aggravation probably and frustration into setting that up, at least for me. so just some thoughts. I will mention one of the biggest things you can do is network with the community. You can see that's number 6. So we'll just jump into these. So there's really 2 big professional associations I always recommend people get into. So there is ISA. This is the group that publishes the gold standard, right, for cybersecurity in control system environments. So ISA is definitely one route to go. And then there's also a group called C2SAY. I know it's a horrible name, but is actually created by Derek Harp, founded by Derek Harp. And it's kind of like, if you've ever heard of ISSA in the cybersecurity world, it's like that, but for control system cybersecurity. So bringing cybersecurity professionals together for protecting ICS environments. They do weekly podcasts and webinars, and they're actually on the podcast list that I had earlier. So a lot of great info that you can get, a lot of great information, and it's great community as well. So there's different conferences. Control System Cybersecurity Senate for me is a like unheard of gem. It's kind of like hidden. It's a very small conference, but the people that go are amazing, and it really is a hidden gem. Dragos has DISC every year, so if you're an owner or operator, it's always November 5th, no matter what day. The ICS Village at DEF CON, and they go to a few other events. Like you'll also see them at like S4, even though they don't have such a big presence there. But so there's S4, which is run by Dale Peterson, which is more kind of focused on the future of control system cybersecurity. So he's looking for kind of like bleeding edge type of ideas, which is interesting. I love going. I had a great time this last year. So I think I still try to focus more on the practical, because most environments still aren't doing the basics today, let alone trying to think of the latest and greatest that's going to come out in 5 years. So, and the SANS ICS Summit is tremendous. If you can go to that as well. So that's run by Rob Lee and Tim Conway and the rest of the SANS team. And they bring in some incredible talks for 2 days, and you can hang out and you can just go to the summit. You don't have to do the $10,000 courses. You can just go for the summit, and it's amazing. So ISACs, Information Security and Analysis Centers, are where people from different industries come together to share information about what's going on in their environment. So if you work in, let's say, a power plant, you can join Electricity ISAC and share with others. Or if you're in oil and gas, or so on and so forth. So you can get a complete list of those. Some are better than others. Some are free, some are not. Some cost a lot of money. I think it was like $100,000 for us to join the oil and gas ISAC when I looked at it, because it was based off of the number of employees you have. So it's definitely, find the one in your niche and see if it'll fit in your budget. And hopefully it'll be one that has a lot of great participation and a lot of great resources. So, social media is a great place to connect with people. I just focus on LinkedIn these days. And so here are the folks, you see top 14, all that I can fit on the page, that I follow on LinkedIn and have a lot of great conversations with a lot of these people. They're very active on LinkedIn and contribute a lot to the community. So I wanted to share those with everybody. So you can see folks like Derek Karp that runs C2Say and Dale Peterson that runs S4, but you see some others, and there's some. I did put myself on the list. So except I'm Mike Holcomb on LinkedIn. I just realized that, so I need to change that. And there's a couple also great women in the industry as well, so that you'll see on the list. So definitely look to support all these folks that are out there. So CTF challenges are great ways to learn and get some experience, hands-on experience, even if it's in a simulated environment. But SANS always does one every year with their summit, and they open that up to the general public. And Dragos does one every year. The one this year, as you can see, is going to start on November 2nd, and it goes for 48 hours. It's like 2 days, maybe even a little bit longer. So I put the link in there. So definitely check that out and sign up. And that's a great way. Just you can do it at your own pace, look and kind of learn as you go along. It's really very cool. So another suggestion would be to make sure, for step number 7, stay current with current events, right? What's going on, not only in the ICS OT threat landscape, but IT as well, because the majority of attacks that get into OT environments are still going to come from IT. So not only do we have to worry about protecting OT, but we also have to protect IT as well. And so pulling that through. So there's a couple of resources that I use. These are the ones that I mainly look to for ICS OT. So you can see the Dragos blog, Mandiant blog, Industrial Cyber is a great news site. I mentioned that mostly run by Anna that I mentioned earlier on the earlier list. Bleeping Computer covers both IT, mostly IT, but also some OT. So if there's a really high visible OT news story, you'll see it there. Security Work or Security Week has a specific section related to ICS OT, and then the SANS Internet Storm Center, which is like kind of like the Mandiant blog or Bleeping Computer, more IT focused. But if there's something extremely important in the OT world, that it'll come out. So step 8, find an experienced mentor. So find somebody that already works in the field and that has that knowledge and can help guide you, and maybe even if it's just to answer your questions, but it can also help further define your path down learning ICS OT cybersecurity. So a couple thoughts there. Just keep us on time. I'll just kind of keep going though. There's some relevant soft skills we talk about. I was trying to figure out I call it empathetic facilitator is what I came up with, but it's this idea that one of the biggest problems we have in securing ICS OT environments is that oftentimes, especially when IT is just cybersecurity, right? It's being introduced to OT, that there's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of barriers between people on, we say, the OT side of the house and the IT side of the house. And what we forget is we're all part of the same house, right? We all live under the same roof, in this context. And so we need to protect our house, right, from the people that are trying to break in. And if we're just at each other's throats, which can happen and get very ugly in some environments, that the only people that win are the attackers. And so there's the biggest thing you can do is learn how to work with others and kind of build. I always talk about building bridges, right? But to be able to find those commonalities with the engineers. And that's why, again, it goes back to the number one thing: learn as much about engineering as possible, because if you can talk the talk and walk the walk, the people in the OT environments, they'll welcome you. They'll see that even if you're just trying, they'll see that, and then they'll want to help you, and then you can help them in return. But until you start building those bridges and finding those commonalities that and to build that trust over time. It's if we don't do that, we're never going to secure these environments. So, and then there's other skills you can see, which you might imagine this like kind of like any job, right? Active listening and problem solving and et cetera, right? The more, different skills you have, right? The more you're going to succeed in anything. So that's basically what the last part talks about there. But the big one is really, building those bridges, being the empathetic facilitator, I guess. Still not sure if that works, and then last but not least is get certified. And there's always that conversation about, whether certifications are good or bad. But if you're coming from the IT world trying to get into OT cybersecurity, you need a way to demonstrate your growing knowledge and your passion, because a lot of people don't go get certified. And so if you do, you're one of those people, excuse me, you're one of those people that is showing your knowledge, showing your passion. And so there's really two serious, and these are, I have all the ISA, IEC 62443 certifications. I have all the three the SANS ICS certifications. I do mention Exida and I think it's TÜV Rheinland. They're based out of Germany. So they sound like some great alternatives because they're much less expensive. I just don't have any experience with those. At Floor, we have some engineers that have the Exida certifications. I don't know anybody personally outside of LinkedIn that has TÜV, but that they seem like they're up and coming. They are, like I said, they are based out of Germany. So most of the people that have those certifications, as you might imagine, they're in Europe. So I haven't really seen those come over into like North America yet, other than maybe one or two people on LinkedIn. So, but I've heard really good things about them, especially it's like a more affordable considered the other ones. But so let's talk about the ones that I do have. So ISA, IEC 62443. Remember, that's the gold standard framework on how to build a cybersecurity management program for control system environments. And so ISA, remember, that's the North American version or the United States version of the overall governing body at IEC, that they created a certification series. So there's actually 4 courses and with 4 exams. And you have to take a course before you take an exam. You can't just take an exam on its own. But if you're not an ISA member, it's like $2,000 or $1,800, I think, to take the course and the exam. I think if you become a member, it's only like $100 or so US, then I think you get the course and exam for about $1,600. So just double check, but that's roughly, I think, the cost. So and then if you take all 4 of those courses and exams, then you actually get to become an ISA 62443 cybersecurity expert. That's the name of the certification. I hate the name because you're not an expert in any stretch of the imagination. I've been doing this for, 10 plus years, and I don't call myself an expert either. It's great. It's a great certification to start. I would say it's more like Security Plus. I think a lot of people see it like as the CISSP of the OT world, but it's more like Security Plus. The kicker is, if you do come from an IT cybersecurity background, I would say for the exams, like 70-80% of the exams, it's like basic cybersecurity questions. And then the rest is questions on 62443. So if you pay even half attention to 62443 and you have that cybersecurity knowledge, you can pass these exams fairly quickly. So again, I think they're more designed to teach engineers about cybersecurity basics than to teach IT cybersecurity folks about OT. It's very much so. So just keep that in mind. So, but it does mean something to the engineering folks if you say you have this. So if anything, that's the best thing that comes out of it. It's one of those ways to build the bridges, because you can say 62443, or if you mention ISA or IC, or that you're a member of ISA and go to ISA meetings, which is mostly all engineers, then that's one way to build those bridges. So, And then SANS. So SANS right now, and they actually have, I think, 4 or 5 actual ICS courses, but there's only 3, the original 3 that have certifications associated with them. And I think they have a pen test course and certification coming out in 2024. So I'm excited to get to take that one. But so there's the GICSP, which is the first course. And this is kind of like a general intro to industrial control cybersecurity. And it's designed for both, teaching IT people OT and teaching OT people IT cybersecurity. And that became very apparent when I took the class 10 plus years ago, where I was sitting in a room, and I think I was very lucky because there's probably 70, 80 people, and I would say probably about 70 or 80% were actually OT people. So the OT people outnumber the IT people, which, again, it wasn't this like we're at each other's throats. It's, oh my gosh, like, oh, you work in a water treatment facility. Oh, you work in a power plant. It's like, oh, I could sit there and ask them questions. And when they even ask questions, I could get, their perspective on things and kind of an idea of how they're thinking. And also it's like, oh, when they're asking questions, like, oh, I know the answer to that. It's like, I can have a, side conversation with them and get to learn more about, what they do in their environment and how they see things. And so it's really fascinating. Definitely a great course from that type of experience. I think that's less important these days because now it's a lot easier to have those conversations with people, and you don't have to go take a course. It's still great content, but that content, that base level content is available elsewhere. That's why I actually do a free 20-hour course, because to teach at least that basic information, and you don't have to pay, again, it's 20 hours, right? So it's not a full like 40, 50 hours like I say in course, but still, it's not $10,000. It's zero. So now Grid, that's the Rob Lee course that talks about intrusion detection and how, to paraphrase, how simple it is, how easy it is to be able to do in OT environments. He talks about defense is doable. And it doesn't have to be complicated, right? These are very complex environments, but cybersecurity doesn't have to be complicated in any stretch of the imagination. We're distilling the basics of cybersecurity and things like intrusion detection, right? And response. That's a big focus in the course, right? And that's a big part of what Rob does in his company with Dragos and what he did previously for the NSA. He was a nation state attacker and defender. And so he brings that knowledge to the table, and he's very open and very upfront about all of that experience. So sometimes to where he probably shares too much. You wonder, like, should you really be talking about that? But that's Rob. So a lot of incredible information. Like I said, that was by far the best class I've ever taken, with the best instructor I've ever taken, and it was just fascinating to sit there. I was on the edge of my seat the entire week. Just amazing. And again, just to be able to sit in the room and be able to ask him questions is well worth that $10,000. So, and then there's the GCIP, which was written by Tim Conway. And this focuses on NERC SIP requirements. So if you run a power facility outside of nuclear, so traditional power for whether it's generation or transmission in essentially North America, in the United States or Canada, you fall under NERC SIP requirements. And so it walks you through NERC SIP requirements. Mostly it's just a course about auditing, though. And that was really the exam. It was probably where I think I had like an 89%, which is the worst score I've ever got on a SANS exam, because the questions were mind-numbing, when they're asking, like, in what section would you find, this piece of information to audit? And I'm like, you know what? I just don't care. I don't know if that's horrible, but it's really, like, I'm not a NERC SIP auditor. And I'm like, can I Google this in 30 seconds or less? Yes. But I am not a NERC SIP auditor. Interesting enough, Michael Asante, who I mentioned, really was kind of the founder of ICS OT cybersecurity. His son Alex is a NERC SIP auditor, so it's kind of funny. It comes full circle. But anyways, but if you work in power, if you're a NERC SIP shop, then GCIP is definitely a place to go. I took it because I was in the SANS Masters program and doing my Masters in Industrial Control Cybersecurity. So that was the fit there. So, all right. So there's some other resources you can see there around certification. Again, I mentioned Exida and then the TUV Rhineland folks as well. So definitely check them out. Again, I just don't have any personal experience with them. So, and that really brings us to the end. So hopefully it's the resources here can give you kind of an idea of how to get started up and running. There's a lot more there. As well as you start to get into some of those links. And again, then those are just kind of the ones to get you started. You'll definitely find out more. You'll definitely, I post a lot on LinkedIn about different resources I find as I go along. It's a big part of why I'm on LinkedIn. It's just to share, because when I got into ICS or OT cybersecurity, it was just very frustrating because I didn't know how to start or where to go next. And there weren't a lot of people at the time that were there to help. But that's one of the reasons why I always also look to Rob Lee, because it was, Rob was, he was really the first person openly that embraced new people coming into the industry, which was amazing. And then I would also mention probably Tony Turner on that list earlier as well. He was really great because when I went to S4, he was in the forums before the conference, like answering other people's questions. And I mean, he was just going at it all day, all night, which I really thought was amazing. And he's not judgmental like a lot. Again, the ICS old guard. He comes across as very helpful and wanting to help, educate. Again, not in a judgmental way, which I appreciate as well. So, all right, and with that, so I appreciate it. Thanks for joining this session. Again, I mentioned there is going to be a version of this specific to control system folks that want to get into cybersecurity. So again, there are a lot of commonalities, but there'll also be some differences as well. They don't need to learn how to think like an engineer. Right? But they do need to learn cybersecurity basics. That's the idea. But again, probably 80% is roughly about the same, right? But that's coming up. So, and then again, if you enjoy this, you can always find me out there, and feel free to reach out on LinkedIn anytime, but connect there, and I'll talk to you then. All right, thanks everybody, and thank you. Take care.